As an adult action figure collector, we all like a lot of color on our figures. We want them to pop on our shelf. And deco can often be the arch enemy of an action figure. It can make or break a figure depending on how much deco is needed to make that character actually look like what it's supposed to represent. Case in point, Zebra Stripe Batman, a figure that Bill Beneke and I tried to make for years while we were working on the DC Universe Classics line at Mattel. And the reason it was such a challenge is because every single one of those hits of deco, those stripes, is a separate deco hit. And those add up really quickly to the point that this character had more deco than plastic, if you will. Now, lately there has been a onslaught of, I guess one could say, naked action figures. And no, I don't mean, like Ken dolls without their clothing on. What I mean are action figures where the deco reduction is starting to become more and more noticeable to the point that it's kind of ruining figures. Case in point, this Marvel Legends animated style Spot figure. If you've been a fan of this channel, you know that I've been campaigning for a Spot action figure for my Spider-Man 6-inch shelf forever. But this is not Spot. I mean, not only the lanky animated look, but, Spot should be covered in spots. And the fact that he's not is because deco is very expensive. He's kind of like Zebra Stripe Batman in that sense. Now, there are some characters where you can get away with almost no deco and it works. Case in point, Black Panther, this latest classic version of Black Panther. While I'm not sure he's quite comic accurate with the cape, still works. Other characters, though, when you lose deco, it really stands out. And it becomes obvious that there weren't enough deco hits to sort of, make the rounds. And more, we're seeing figures that just don't have the deco hit, but are rather using the base plastic. Now, again, there are characters that are like Black Panther, like Silver Surfer, that do just have a base color. But even, wash hits and scrib lines can really make a figure pop. Doing a character using the base plastic, the molded color, is something that we've had for decades, and sometimes it really works. Case in point, this K3PO figure from Hoth Base. Yeah, he's got some deco hits on the battle damage, but the bulk of his body is the base color. Now, I think the textbook example of using base color for a deco is the G.I. Joe Real American Hero line that introduced Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes was a character that was all in black, using just the base color of the plastic. It was not colored black. Now, the reason he was colored black, or rather didn't have any color, was just done in his molded black color. And again, we see this in modern G.I. Joe lines too. I'm just using the original release as the example. This was because of price distribution throughout a wave. Now, G.I. Joe figures do share parts, and that's a big reason that they're affordable. But when it came to deco allocation, all of the deco that was allocated for Snake Eyes was removed and given to other figures in that wave. So Snake Eyes was not decoed to save money, essentially. All the deco that would have gone to him went to other figures. The same strategy has been used by McFarlane Toys over and over again, where they'll take in a full wave, and if there's one character that has a lot of deco or plastic, like in the case of Malbolgia here, who's much, much bigger than an average Spawn figure. He's 15 inches tall versus 5 inches, so, 3 times as big. You can see him compared to another figure that shipped in the previous wave, but the size comparison that completely works here, and you can see how much. He could basically fit other figures into his mouth. He's that big. The reason being is the cost was spread out over all of the figures in the wave. So some figures receive less accessories, less deco hits, in order to put more into one figure. In this case, Malbolgia, or in the G.I. Joe case, removing the deco from Snake Eyes is what freed up more deco hits for other characters. Now, McFarlane also was able to take advantage of doing non-decoed figures, or at least one color figures that could either be molded in one color, usually a clear or a metallic, and this is also what allowed him to bring down the total cost of all of his figures. These clear variants that shipped around the same time as Malbolgia is what helped pay for a much larger figure. Now, going and looking again at the way removing deco can affect a figure, there's really two ways. One is a wash. So a lot of old Marvel Legends figures done by Toy Biz were notorious for having really detailed washes. That's when you take kind of a dark black or a gray and it gets sort of sprayed across the figure just to create more depth and more kind of just detail. Most Marvel Legends from Hasbro have no wash on them because, again, wash is an expensive part of the deco process. And you could see a no-wash figure from Hasbro on the left and a figure that does get wash deco on the right. It just creates that sort of gritty, dirty look that works for some figures. Now, again, there are characters that work really well with no deco and no wash, but they do still tend to look a little, well, cheap because you're just looking at the bare plastic. You're looking at the molded color. This figure was molded out of black plastic. And Black Panther has had figures with wash, without wash, different levels of deco to give him different shines, different sheens. So you don't have to just do a character with absolutely no deco in order to make them accurate. You can add more deco to make the price value more obvious at retail. Looking at this figure, well, granted you don't see him because they're now in a closed box, which is probably all part of it. So you've got a non-decoed figure in a closed box, the perfect recipe for selling someone a figure that is going to be below expectations when you take it out. All right, so outside of wash, the other key way deco is removed is belt deco. So you can't remove, eye deco or lips or, hair color, those things pretty much standard. But if you also look at Toy Biz Marvel Legends and compare them to Hasbro, one of the big things you can see is the removal of deco on belts and, gun belts and, all those kind of things. Again, now, Hasbro has slowly faded this out. So even their Nick Fury, which was done, years ago, still had this. If you look at a current figure, there is no deco at all on Razorback's belt, versus that Nick Fury figure had the belt buckles and the pins and all that stuff hit with deco ops. Those details make a figure really stand out, and removing all of that deco does make a figure look inexpensive. This whole belt thing is something I remember when we were doing Fisto for Masters of the Universe Classic. We had to remove a lot of deco from him because there were so many hits on all of those rivets, and most of the deco removal wound up being on the belt. Originally, every rivet, every little detail on his belt had a deco hit on it, but the final version, a lot of that deco was removed because it's a huge amount of deco in one place, and it tends to be the go-to spot. So when you see figures with belts with no deco on the buckles or the hemlines, etc., it's because of deco reduction. This is one of the easiest places to remove deco outside of a full body wash. Once those two things are checked off the cost reduction list, you're not left with too many other options of how to cost reduce a figure. You can't really remove deco from the face, and after you remove the belt deco, you're not left with many options of how to get a figure down to cost without removing then accessories. And that's a lot of times why figures have now only one head and they don't come with, as many alternate hands or other accessories these days. So yeah, when you're seeing a figure that's released in its mold color with very little deco, there's no wash and there's no belt deco, it's most likely because of cost reduction. Some figures you can get away with it. Some they actually, does work, especially when you can have deco in other places like that little battle damage. But even doing clear figures and hologram figures can't always be a solution to this because, well, sometimes even those figures need deco created on them and it takes away from the whole cost savings. Every single time a paintbrush touches a toy, the toy maker, the manufacturer is charged. So you're charged for every belt buckle, every rivet, every snap, etc., etc. And costs can be reduced by taking figures with lots of deco and pairing them in a multi-pack with a character with almost no deco. It winds up sort of one character sort of takes it for the team, if you will. And yeah, it's a shame because deco really makes characters look fantastic. And now that we're in a time where prices are going up so much because of labor, we're having to look at more and more figures that are going to lose deco. All right, I hope this video explained a little bit more about how deco choices are made and how and where the designers will go to cost reduce. The best way you can support this channel is by sharing it with others, and I thank you ahead of time for that. Let me know if there's any other questions. I'm always happy to make follow-up videos, and thanks as always for watching Spectre Creative.